a trusted babysitter, a loving family, and an innocent child. It should have been the perfect setup. But behind closed doors, a nightmare was unfolding. A betrayal so shocking, it shattered everything they thought they knew about trust. For months, a dark web of encrypted messages and disturbing videos spun in secrecy. A woman, seemingly innocent, had turned her darkest desires into reality. A father, miles away, directed every twisted act from the shadows. This wasn't just a crime, it was calculated, cold, and relentless. How did this woman, once trusted by everyone, fall so far? And how did investigators piece together the horrifying truth? This is the story of a family's devastation, the weight of trust destroyed, the scars that will never heal. But before we begin, I just want to take a moment to thank you, my incredible viewers and subscribers. Your likes, shares, and thoughtful comments don't just support this channel. They help keep these stories alive. If you're new here, welcome. Be sure to hit that subscribe button and become part of this growing community that believes every story deserves to be told and no victim should ever be forgotten. Now let's get into it. Paige Pool seemed like any other 29-year-old woman trying to navigate life in a new country. Originally from the United States, she had moved to Exeter in the UK and settled into a quiet, seemingly ordinary life. She was married, had a steady job, and appeared to be an ideal candidate for one of the most trusted roles in society, a babysitter. Her reputation in the community was spotless. Paige was friendly, responsible, and always went above and beyond for the families she worked for. Families trusted her with their most precious possessions. Her babysitting clients praised her for her dedication, her warmth, and how effortlessly she built genuine connections with their children. On the surface, Paige was everything a parent would want in a caregiver. Her calm demeanor and reliability made her a household name, a caregiver everyone could depend on. But like many stories that have a dark ending, what was hidden beneath that surface was a world of chaos waiting to erupt. Her marriage, lasting just a year and a half, wasn't enough to keep her satisfied. Curiosity, a force many know too well, began to pull her into dark corners of the internet. It started small. Paige was searching for something, an escape, maybe, or something new to satisfy the unspoken desires that lived beneath the surface of her seemingly perfect life. One click led to another, and before long, she had uncovered a new world. A world that celebrated fantasies that many others wouldn't dare touch. Her curiosity heightened and took a dark turn, and it wasn't long before she found herself on an underground fetish site where people like her, and worse, went to find like-minded souls. And that's where Ross Kingsland came into the picture. Ross wasn't just anyone. He was a 44-year-old businessman, a father, and by all appearances, another respectable member of society. He had a family, a career, and the kind of life most would envy. But under the surface, Ross was something else. He was a predator, seeking to exploit others' weaknesses and vulnerabilities. And there was Paige, eager to satisfy her curiosity, open to whatever dark world Ross would pull her into. The two quickly connected. They created personas online, two people playing roles, feeding into each other's darkest impulses. Ross called himself Dirty Dad. Yeah, you read that right. Paige, eager to fulfill every twisted request, became his dark angel. These were their pet names, a symbol of the secret, disturbing relationship they built together. A relationship that, at first, seemed harmless enough to them, but quickly escalated into something neither would be able to stop. You might be thinking, how does someone go from a caring, responsible babysitter to the kind of person capable of such unthinkable acts? Trust me, you're not alone in that question. The internet has a way of drawing people into dark spaces, and for Paige, What started as innocent curiosity quickly turned into obsession. Her need for validation, for someone to accept her unspoken desires, was more powerful than any warning bells that might have gone off in her head. And Ross, well, he knew how to exploit that. He fed her fantasies, told her exactly what he wanted her to do, and over time, Paige began to act on those instructions, one step at a time. Their relationship didn't just stay online. Paige, now fully submerged in this world, took action, her morals slipping away with each passing message, each twisted request from Ross. Paige went beyond just chatting about her fantasies. She began to film them. You can only imagine how much further things went from there. What might have once seemed like a harmless exploration of dark desires had become a dangerous, devastating turn, and no one, not even Paige, could see how far it was all about to go. The toddler, just 18 months old, was completely innocent, completely unaware of the horrifying storm that was brewing around them. The child's parents, unsuspecting and trusting, had no reason to believe that the woman they had trusted to care for their baby was capable of anything other than what they had always seen. Paige had been their babysitter for months, a constant figure in their home, dependable, warm, always eager to please. To them, she was like family, someone they could count on without question. But in the shadows, Paige was far from the person they thought they knew. The first time it happened, it wasn't something anyone could have predicted. The child's cries, the discomfort, the signs of distress, they all remained unnoticed, at least by the parents. But Paige knew exactly what she was doing, and Ross, the man behind the scenes, was pulling the strings from miles away. Paige, acting on Ross's sick instructions, recorded her first act. You could almost picture the coldness as she filmed, all while her mind was clouded by the twisted words Ross had spoken to her. When she finished, she didn't hesitate. The footage was sent immediately to him, her secret partner in crime, her guide through this nightmare. The text that followed was chilling in its simplicity. Ross, good girl. Go further next time. Paige, are you sure? I don't want them to notice. It was just the beginning. Every time she crossed a new boundary, Paige felt that rush, driven by Ross's words, pushing her further into the darkness. With every act, the digital trail she left behind grew longer, more damning. Encrypted platforms, secret folders, hidden devices, nothing was left to chance. Everything was documented, saved, and stored, as if she knew the time would come when those very images would be all that stood between her and a much-deserved punishment. The evidence was being meticulously catalogued, and Paige was sinking deeper into the web she had woven for herself. But here's the thing. Ross was not some passive bystander in this horrific story. He never physically touched the child, but his influence was far stronger than mere actions. It was all in the words. Ross dictated everything Paige did, urging her to push boundaries, to go further, to make it more disturbing each time. His influence was like a dark cloud hovering over every decision, every moment that could have been a turning point. He was the one that kept her in this spiral of horror. Their messages, chilling and devoid of any remorse, were their way of communicating in a world where silence screamed louder than any words ever could. Ross, you know what to do. Make it memorable. Memorable. A word that, in any other context, might mean something significant, something positive. But in this world of manipulation, it was a command, a sick directive that Paige followed with terrifying dedication. And the worst part? She was still playing the part of the devoted, dependable babysitter, all while her actions were leaving behind an undeniable trail of destruction. Every word, every message was pushing her further away from any shred of humanity. It started subtly at first, small, seemingly insignificant changes that no one could pinpoint. The toddler, once a joyful, carefree child, began to cry more often. Friends and family brushed it off at first, assuming it was just a phase, something every child goes through. But then came the withdrawal. The once outgoing little one became quieter, less engaged, a hesitation to be left alone with Paige. Parents, family, and friends who had watched this child grow saw the signs. The distress was there, but no one dared say it out loud. How could they? Paige had always been the perfect babysitter, kind, responsible, the kind of person any parent would feel comfortable leaving their child with. How could they even think that she could be the cause of this change? Yet, the signs didn't lie. The child wasn't the same. Still, everyone hesitated. It wasn't clear. Could they be overreacting? Was this just a normal phase for a toddler? Parents reassured themselves, convincing their instincts that they were imagining things. After all, Paige was trusted by everyone, and everyone loved her. It felt wrong to even entertain the possibility that something darker was going on. But whispers started to rise, murmurs that no one could ignore. Has anyone noticed how the child acts around Paige? One person asked quietly, almost afraid to voice the question. Another hesitated before responding, "Maybe we're overthinking it." But those whispers didn't die down. They lingered in the air, growing more frequent as the weeks went on, and yet no one acted. Not because they didn't care, but because they couldn't imagine the unimaginable. Because the truth was too terrifying to face. They stayed silent, watching and waiting, hoping that their concerns were just paranoia. Little did they know, with every ignored red flag, the danger was getting closer, weaving itself deeper into the fabric of their lives. The breakthrough came when the Metropolitan Police realized they were already a step behind. Ross Kingsland had been on their radar for months, suspected of engaging with dark predator networks. They knew this wasn't just a one-off situation, so they set up an undercover operation to catch him red-handed. Officers posed as a mother of two young daughters, 8 and 12 years old, on a hidden online platform called They Grow Up So Fast. They knew exactly how to bait him. Ross took the bait without hesitation. He didn't just flirt with danger, he dove into it, sending a video of a 5-year-old he claimed to have abused. The video didn't just shock them, it was proof, cold and damning. The case was turning in their favor. In July 2023, the police moved in. They weren't taking any chances. It was an early morning raid at Ross's home. He resisted, but it didn't matter. They had everything they needed to secure his arrest. As they cuffed him, the reality of his twisted world was starting to come apart, piece by piece. But this wasn't the end. The very next day, Paige made a fatal mistake. Instead of hiding, she went straight to Ross's wife and blurted out, "I'm his girlfriend." Was she trying to be bold, to own the situation, or was it panic creeping in? Either way, it didn't matter. The damage had already been done. Paige, thinking she could outsmart the authorities, turned herself in. She handed over a phone, wiped clean, assuming that would shield her. But investigators weren't fooled. They knew there had to be more. They could feel it, the cold weight of the evidence still waiting to be uncovered. And they were determined to find it. What Paige didn't realize was that her actions were about to unravel everything. The web she thought she was controlling was starting to collapse, and the truth was no longer a matter of if, but when. The investigation was about to go into overdrive, and Paige's desperation was just the beginning. When Paige was arrested, there was an air of finality about it, a sense that the truth was finally about to break through the walls of secrecy. But nothing could prepare investigators for what came next. As they combed through her belongings, one object stood out, an unassuming phone tucked away, hidden among her personal effects. It hadn't been wiped. It wasn't the phone she had handed over, the one she thought was her way of escaping, but the one that would bring everything crashing down. This phone was untouched. and what it contained was a digital archive of everything that had been carefully concealed. The videos, the images, the twisted text conversations. Hundreds of them, documenting every step of the horrific path Paige and Ross had walked together. The evidence wasn't just damning, it was undeniable. Every single thing they had done was laid out, exposed in a way that could no longer be ignored. It was a treasure trove for investigators, one they would never have expected to find, yet everything was right there, hidden in plain sight. Forensic experts did what they do best. They dug deep, recovering deleted content, unearthing the messages and images that Paige had thought were gone forever. What they found wasn't just evidence of abuse, it was evidence of premeditation, of careful planning, of a twisted partnership that ran much deeper than anyone had imagined. The messages between Paige and Ross revealed how they had meticulously plotted the abuse, how Ross pushed Paige further each time, and how he celebrated her compliance. There was no question of coercion. This was a willing, calculated collaboration, and it all started to unravel piece by piece. Ross's instructions, Paige's compliance, the sickening encouragement, it was all there in black and white. Each message, each video, each photo was a part of the web they had spun, each one leading to this moment. The truth was no longer something hidden behind a screen, a secret confined to encrypted messages or deleted files. It was out in the open for everyone to see, and the impact was devastating. When Paige was finally confronted with this evidence, there was no escaping the truth. No more lies, no more manipulation. The room was heavy with the weight of everything that had come to light. And in that moment, Paige's reaction was chilling. There was no defiance, no outrage, just silence. And then, tears. It wasn't the kind of remorse that came from a place of regret or guilt. It was the silence of someone who knew they were cornered. The tears came not from a realization of what she had done, but from the crushing weight of knowing that there was no way out. But here's the thing. There was no denial. No attempt to cover up the truth. Paige knew what the investigators had found, and she knew it was the end of the road. The phone, the images, the conversations, they had all painted a clear picture of her involvement. And with that, everything Paige and Ross had worked so hard to hide was now exposed for the world to see. There was no turning back. The courtroom was packed. You could almost feel the tension in the air, thick and suffocating. The case had captured the nation's attention, and now, here they were, Paige and Ross, sitting at the center of it all, facing their moment of reckoning. The public outrage was explosive. How could anyone, let alone a babysitter, do something so horrifying? How had they failed to see it, to stop it, before it got this far? The courtroom buzzed with whispers, with angry glances, and a deep-seated disbelief at the magnitude of the crimes that had been uncovered. Everyone was waiting for justice to unfold, waiting to see if the evidence would speak loud enough to drown out the pain. The prosecution wasted no time. They had the medical reports, physical signs of abuse that were undeniable. The child, the innocent victim in all of this, had suffered in ways no one should ever have to imagine. The doctors confirmed it. The toddler had been physically harmed, bruises, scars, proof that Paige had taken this to the next level. And the digital records? They were the nail in the coffin. The messages, the videos, the encrypted files, every single piece of evidence pointed to one truth. Paige and Ross had plotted and executed these crimes with chilling precision. It wasn't just a crime of passion, it was calculated, methodical, and the proof was all over their phones, their computers, their words. Then came the expert witnesses, the ones who were tasked with peeling back the layers of Paige and Ross's psyches, trying to understand how two seemingly normal people could be capable of such depravity. Psychologists took the stand, analyzing their personalities, their motivations. Paige, they said, had been manipulated. She'd been controlled by Ross, someone who knew how to prey on her vulnerabilities. Ross, on the other hand, was a different breed. Cold, calculating. He knew exactly what he was doing every step of the way. The experts painted a picture of two predators who found each other in the darkest corners of their desires. Together they were a dangerous, toxic pair. But the defense? Well, they fought hard. Paige, as expected, claimed she was manipulated. She tried to convince the court that she had been coerced into this by Ross, that she was simply a pawn in his game. As for Ross, he dug in his heels and insisted, over and over again, that he never touched a child. He played the victim, the one who had merely watched from the sidelines. He had never physically harmed anyone, he said. But the problem? His words didn't match his actions, and the evidence didn't lie. The trial wasn't about who touched the child. It was about who encouraged it, who directed it, and who made sure it was documented. And when you have messages like "go further next time" and "make it memorable," there's no gray area. Days passed, the arguments were made, the evidence was presented, and finally the jury retired to deliberate. The courtroom sat in tense silence, waiting for the final verdict. Would Paige and Ross finally be held accountable for their twisted actions, or would they somehow manage to escape the consequences of their actions, just like so many others before them? The stakes were high, and the tension was unbearable. And then it came. The moment everyone had been waiting for. The jury had reached a verdict. Guilty, they said, on all charges. Paige, facing 20 charges, was found guilty. Ross, facing 12, was found guilty as well. The weight of those words echoed through the courtroom. The people in the gallery, some who had followed the case from the beginning, exhaled a collective sigh of relief. Justice, it seemed, had finally been served. Judge David Evans said, "You were both adults who knew what you were doing each and every step of the way. Each chose to plan and enact their deviant desires. This was a true meeting of wicked minds. The bald truth is that each of you is a morally corrupt Paige, and it was the great misfortune of others that you found each other. You have deliberately and together caused the most awful distress to a good number of people. You have destroyed the lives of individuals and families concerned." The courtroom fell silent as the judge read out their sentences, the weight of it all hanging in the air like a storm waiting to break. Paige, her face a mixture of stoic detachment and quiet regret, was sentenced to 13 years in prison. 13 years. For everything she had done, everything that no one should ever have to imagine. But here's the catch. She would only have to serve 2/3 of that sentence before being eligible for parole. The rest of her life would be spent on the sex offenders register, forever marked by the horrors she had committed, unable to escape the consequences of her actions, even if she somehow managed to leave prison one day. It's as if society made sure she'd always be reminded, locked in a cage of her own making. And Ross? He got 11 years. 11. The judge called it a significant sentence, but is that really enough? 11 years for someone who not only encouraged these acts, but orchestrated them from behind the screen, manipulating Paige into becoming his accomplice? Someone who never physically touched the child, but whose twisted instructions and sickening messages made him just as guilty? He too was sentenced to serve 2/3 of his time, and like Paige, he would carry the weight of being listed on the sex offenders register for the rest of his life. No parole after 11 years would ever wash away the lives he had destroyed. But here's the gut-wrenching truth. The public didn't see it as enough. The sentencing sparked an outcry, a roar of anger from every corner of society. People couldn't believe that they were being allowed to serve so little time for such monstrous acts. 13 years? 11? Was that justice, or was it a slap on the wrist? There were cries of life sentences, no parole, demands that both Paige and Ross be locked away forever, far away from society. Because let's face it, how can someone like that ever be reintroduced into the world after what they've done? Many believed that if anyone deserved to be locked up for life, it was them. And the victims' parents? The ones who had trusted Paige, who had thought their child was safe in her care, were shattered. No words could ease their pain as they faced the reality that their child's life had been forever altered. They spoke, raw emotion behind every word. We will suffer a life sentence knowing we failed to protect our child. That, right there, is the real life sentence. Their hearts had been broken, trust betrayed, and no amount of time served by Paige or Ross would ever undo the damage they caused. After the sentence, Senior Investigating Officer Detective Inspector C. Costin said, "This has been a very difficult investigation for everyone involved and one of the worst cases my team has dealt with. It has taken months of painstaking work, including reviewing very upsetting images. The only satisfaction we can take is that the two offenders will be in prison for a long time and can't hurt anyone else." This case is far from an isolated incident. In fact, studies show that approximately 10 to 15% of child abuse cases involve trusted caregivers like babysitters. Yes, the very people parents turn to for help, those who are supposed to keep their children safe. While most babysitters are responsible, this statistic highlights the dangers that can sometimes lurk behind seemingly innocent faces. It's hard to fathom how something so horrific could go unnoticed for so long. The red flags were there, yet they were ignored or misunderstood. It raises an unsettling question. Could anyone have stopped this sooner? Could the early warning signs, the behavioral shifts in the child, have been enough to prevent this tragedy if someone had spoken up? Sadly, the child's suffering doesn't end with the trial. The emotional and psychological scars left by such abuse will last a lifetime. As the child grows older, there will be a long road to healing. But with the right support, therapy, and love, we can only hope that the damage is not irreversible. Paige wasn't the first, and sadly, she won't be the last. This is a cold reminder of the dangers that can exist even in the most seemingly safe environments. The disturbing truth is that abuse like this continues to happen all over, in homes, neighborhoods, and communities that seem to be full of trust. But that trust can be easily broken, and when it is, the damage can be devastating. If something feels off, don't ignore it. Speak up. When hiring a babysitter, always do your due diligence. Background checks are essential. Make sure you're not just trusting someone on the surface, but ensuring their history and credibility are intact. Keep an eye out for behavioral changes in your child, and don't hesitate to act if anything feels wrong. Your voice, your actions, they could prevent another nightmare. One step can protect a child. Let's not wait for the next story to unfold before we take the necessary steps to safeguard our little ones. If this story has shaken you, if it's made you think twice about who you trust with your loved ones, hit that like button right now. Your support means the world to us and helps keep these important conversations going. If you haven't already, subscribe and turn on the bell notifications so you don't miss out on future videos that tackle real issues like this. We dive deep into cases that matter, and we want you to be part of this journey. And if you know someone who needs to hear this message, share this video. You never know who might be on the edge of making an important decision about their children's safety. Let's keep this conversation going. Together, we can make a difference.